evening.
Good evening.
Just a few things, bits and pieces here and there. I heard today for the first time about Prajnatara. Prajnatara was the teacher of Bodhidharma, the one who sent him from India to China. And he is considered to be the founder of Zen Buddhism. Are we all on the same page? Do you know who Bodhidharma is? Well, I heard today that Prajnatara was a woman. There's two traditions in Buddhism that say that Prajnatara was a woman. I did not know that. I never heard of that.
No, that's a scandal.
I was shocked. Usually the women have their own tradition, you know, coming through their convents and so on. Reminds me of Hatshepsut in Egypt, you know. I wonder if she pretended she was a man. But the interesting thing is that this puts a woman's voice and a woman's insight into the very beginning of Zen Buddhism. And, I wonder what you would make of that. What influence would that make? How would that change your understanding of Zen to realize perhaps that the initial insight was that of a woman? What?
Now it all makes sense.
No. Perhaps the doing away with words, the emphasis on action, show me, do it. Perhaps a patient waiting, not trying to force life, but being receptive to it. Well, that's it about, nothing more to say about this except what a surprise it was, and that it does change things, really. It does explain something, I'm not sure what yet, but. And it says something about Bodhidharma, that he accepted the teaching of a woman, but a woman shaped his destiny, his future. Another bit of just information, one of the great Christian teachers is recognized as an authority all over the world is Ronan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, until 1912 when he stepped down and retired. And since then, in just these 3 years, he has written 2 books in very scholarly fashion. And the first book deals with what we used to call natural theology. And that is trying to understand something of the existence and the character of God through the phenomena of the world. And Archbishop Williams will have none of it. He says all human knowledge is metaphorical. It is not literal when we speak of God. We can say nothing literally about God. About God's existence, God is intelligent, that God is compassionate, all these things we say about God are not literally true as we understand them. Now, metaphorical statements have their own truth. But the issue is that we have a devotional language that we find comforting and that gives us security and that comes easily off our lips. And again, Williams is just telling us to be careful that none of it is literally true. Knowledge is not given to us. We are told by Jesus to trust like a child, but knowledge is not given. This is a big shift in Catholic thought. I can't tell you how many times in my life I heard people tell me that God's will is so clear. Well, only in a metaphorical sense. Now, the second book that Archbishop Williams wrote was on the Gospel of St. Mark. And this is the, yes?
I just wonder if I can make a comment.
Yes.
It's kind of refreshing to hear you say that, because I've often thought about that the things we learn in catechism and in other places are really things that were written by other men, maybe centuries ago. Right. And I would ask myself, how was that written so we can understand? Or is that actually the revelatory truth? And I'm kind of interested in what you said, because I really think, well, I know it's true, because knowledge is like out there, but where our understanding is here. And I think sometimes the writings we read and are told are sort of put in a form we can understand. And I'm not sure I'm not sure of the relationship, if you can understand what I'm kind of saying.
Right.
That string, how direct it is.
Well, we do the best we can. Metaphorical language has its own truth, and it's the best that human beings can do. God is like this or like that. And that has to be taken seriously. The best humanity can do is something we should pay attention to. It's just that it's not literally true. And that gives us room for a prayer that is just attention. Like the prayer of Samuel, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." It's a wonderful prayer. I'm listening. I'm not promising you a great performance. I'm just listening. And that is a wonderful thing. In this world where we are so easily distracted. I think prayer, what Zen can teach us about prayer is the presence, a prayer of presence. That says, may your will be done in my life. I have no idea what that will might be. May your will be done in my life. May I conform to reality. And this is pure Zen. Attention to what is. Attention to the way things are. Which is hard enough to know. That's a process that's always changing and growing as we change and grow. But I think there are wonderful forms of prayer that have been in use always. But always have been people who just stopped in their tracks. I'm watching, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. Anyone else have anything? add to this? Well, about St. Mark, the second book that he wrote, and this is interesting for us now because it's liturgical year. We're reading St. Mark. And what St. Mark says is the power of God, is the helplessness of Christ, that he was stripped of all his power and knowledge. He had to endure this Roman horrible execution. He was caught up in this. And it is the helplessness of God, it's the helplessness of humanity that is the manifestation of God's strength. It's good that we pay attention to reality and tack in that wind as we see reality change, that we change and conform to what seems to be the truth of things. We cannot force our will on reality because we don't know ultimately what the truth is. The truth will be manifested to us in our weakness. And that's the way St. Mark's Gospel ends. The women run from the empty tomb in great fear. Because they have seen something of what is the manifestation of God's will, based on human emptiness and inability. Now, the early church could not really accept this. It could not end the gospel with women running hysterically from an empty tomb. So they added another 12 verses that talk about resurrection and ascension, but that's not what St. Mark wrote. And that's not the version that is in the Vatican Library. It ends with the terror of the disciples who saw this manifestation of God's will and God's power revealed in human weakness. So there's something in Zen here too. Zen is not something we can force our will. It's not a place where we can force our will on life. We know that we cannot control our mind for even a few seconds. It is a patient practice, day after day, enduring human weakness in the hope that something wonderful will be manifested, made clear to us. So that's what I have to say about Roman Williams. Any comments on that? Yes, please.
Yeah, I would like to share out loud. Today happens to be the 1-year anniversary of my Tai Chi teacher's death. Exactly today, February 5th. And so she was a woman, and Tai Chi is a connection between the Tai Chi in the Zen. And one of the things she used to say was,
Could you speak up?
yeah,
please?
sorry. Her name was Jean Kwok, my Tai Chi teacher, who passed exactly a year, February 5th last year. things she said, woman's teacher. She said, move your center and allow. Move your center and allow. And I think there's a connection to what you said.
Very beautiful. Well, the third point I just wanted to mention was an editorial just 2 days ago in the New York Times by David Brooks. Did anyone read it? It's quite interesting. He's writing about the secular spirit in religion today. That 1/3 of all people say that they are agnostic and do not know what the truth of things is. And 1/2 of all young people, this is to say what age, 1/2 of all young people are secular in that sense, that they step back from a religious commitment and want a secular expression in their lives. And it's interesting that Pope Francis said that's just fine. There are some people who have a secular mind, a secular expression of life, and that's the way they contribute to the common good. Not everybody has the religious gene. Not everybody thinks that way or has that spirit, and that they contribute to the common good by their secular life. Doctors, lawyers, cooks, Indian chiefs, whatever they do. So the emphasis is not to try to convert these people. It shouldn't really be done. But allow them to be, allow them to breathe and to do their thing. It doesn't matter whether they say they believe or not, as long as they are working for the common good and doing it well. What can we expect of anyone? So this can bring a great deal of peace in the world. If we stop chiding people for not believing, hectoring them to believe, especially to come to your church, whatever. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't this a big improvement? Yes.
Isn't that what Jesus did? He was a carpenter. I don't know that I could say that I knew or that I understand the religious. He taught by example.
Yes. Teaching by example.
He taught to trust.
Right. I have that editorial with a few lines I thought were especially good. The problem is that secularists are not secular enough, he says. They're not vigorous enough. They have a lot to do. It's not enough to say we cause no evil and we wish everyone well with great benevolence. This, he says, is not really enough. To get the right letter, I can't read this law. says the only secularism that can really arouse moral motivation and impel action is enchanted secularism. Enchanted secularism. I suspect over the next few years, secularism will change its face and become more consuming, less content with mere benevolence, and more responsive to the spiritual urge that is in each one of us. What is that, the spiritual urge that is in each one of us? The drive for purity, self-transcendence, and sanctification. The New York Times.
Sure has none in this print.
That this is really what we are looking for. It's what at the heart of us, really, not just mere benevolence to others. Because Christianity does not just rely on a feeling of empathy. It puts love at the center. A self-sacrificial love. And Judaism doesn't just value community. It values a convental community infused with sacred bonds and chosenness that makes the heartstrings vibrate. So, secularism is a good thing. Perhaps we just need more of it. It has to be more vibrant. As he says, more like religion. It has to challenge people. You haven't loved enough. You haven't been yourself enough. We haven't been pure enough. We have not achieved the true self-transcendence. We have not put ourselves completely into the work of our sanctification. This is not an old Monsignor. This is the editorial page of the New York Times about what we really want, why we're really here. Isn't that interesting? Any comments on that?
There's a shift happening, I guess.
Pardon?
There must be a shift happening.
Yes. That's what I like about Zen, really, one of the things. It does challenge us. It doesn't try to flatter us, or tell us we're just fine. It says right off the bat, you can do better. You should do better. You must. If you want to be yourself. Interesting. That's what brings so many men into Zen. Christian churches are largely filled with women, and the men are elsewhere, but not with Zen. People that come to Zen are usually evenly balanced, pretty much, men and women together. Which I think is what men and women should be together. So, and nice words, the thing is, do we sit this way? Sit this way. What way? The way deep down you really want. And nobody can tell you how to do that. drive for purity, self-transcendence, sanctification. It's your unique gift. Yes, Deborah.
Jessica.
Yes.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. Because one of the other reasons in Mark is one of ignorance. The disciples are following around Jesus the whole time and they don't get it. That's one of the main other themes in Mark. That they're in the presence of Jesus often and they don't recognize it. They don't get it. How have you seen, you see this in Mark, and the disciples are literally in the presence of Jesus, walking around with them, seeing him do miracles, and they're confused. How can we expect the secular movement or any movement, or any group of people, in the face of something that isn't as obviously clear, to become all the things that you're mentioning?
I mean, how can I explain human ignorance?
No, what I mean is how can we hope for better than human ignorance if even in the Gospel of Mark there's blatant ignorance in the face of great miracles?
It's worse than that. And remember I believe it was in Mark, I'm not sure, remember, the only one who recognized Jesus was the unclean spirit. Because we know who he was, Jesus. Isn't that interesting? All the disciples, all the pious people following Jesus around, they all missed the point, except the unclean spirit.
Why is that?
Hmm?
Why is that?
I have no idea. Yes.
I want to disagree a little bit. See, I don't think it was ignorance. These were very earthy men, the disciples, were very earthy men. They were smart, what we would say street smart today. But, and Jesus was very shrewd too, okay? I think they could not quite wrap their head around what they were seeing. They needed time to understand, and Jesus fed them pieces. The evil spirit was the devil. Of course he knew who Jesus was. So I think we have to be a little kind with those disciples. And it gets back to what you were talking about before. Knowledge is at one level, the understanding is at another level. So I think that's a very interesting, what shall we say, paradigm, where you have these disciples, they're not dumb or anything like that. They just, imagine Jesus walking in here and says, "Hi, I'm the Son of God." What would we say? Okay? And I think there's a little of that there.
Of course, yes, well said. The issue raised, though, is ignorance. And I just want to say a word about that because it's one of the three great poisons in Buddhism. And it's greed, hatred, and ignorance. And I often wondered about those three things. All the evil in the world. They said this is the root of it. Greed. Someone said about Washington, our capital, it's the city where everything is for sale. And hatred, anger. That's interesting. And ignorance, remember, ignorance is not nescience. Ignorance is not that you don't know how many sheep there are in New Zealand. Ignorance means you don't know what you should know. It's nothing to do with intelligence. So the Buddhists say they don't believe in a That's the root of our problems. We do not know what we should know. we refuse to know. That's what the Buddhists are after.
Jesus saying the same thing, men don't want to come to the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed.
That's right. They would say, to the extent they believe in sin, they would say that ignorance is the root of it, our refusal to come to the light. There was a movie with Jack Nicholson. He proposes marriage to this woman who turns him down, and she says, "You're too old not to know the things you should know." Or the story of Uncle Charlie, the little black boy talking to the white man, Uncle Charlie. He's trying to tell Uncle Charlie about the horrible circumstances in his community, and Charlie keeps saying, "I didn't." Finally, the little boy says, "Uncle Charlie, how is it you don't know the things that you don't know?" That's the ignorance that Buddhists are talking about. The root of our problem is greed, hatred, ignorance. Any comment on it? Yes, sir.
Socrates said that he knew nothing.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember what he meant by that. Can you shed any light on it?
Well, I guess there's several ways you could go with that. I can't presume to know the minds of Socrates. I think not knowing trivia opens the mind to knowing other possibilities. You know, the mind can only deal with so much information. What is it that we know or think we know? Of what value is it? I think in opening his mind, what was really important is what made him great.
The Buddha say, they can say they know, don't really know. And Jesus said, whoever thinks they're well, don't need a position. So those that think they know don't need any revelation. They won't get anything.
Right. Right. Now, one final point before we go over to the next step. The Zen practice, which one way of doing it is mu, you chant out loud in the Zendo, just mu, is a way of silencing the mind running after knowledge that is not helpful. And that includes all Buddhist thought. It's not helpful in doing Zazen. You can be an expert in Buddhist philosophy and not be able to progress in Zazen because your mind is cluttered with Buddhist thought. I'd like to tell the story of Mayazumi Roshi, Los Angeles. We were lined up just like this in a row to go in to see him in Daisan. One of the young men ahead of me went in, and I heard some rumbling in there. And finally I heard Mayazumi scream. It was heard all over the Zendo. He says, "Stop talking about Buddhism. Go into the Zendo and sit!" I thought to myself, I think I'll skip Daisan. It's only 5 in the morning and the Roshi is already in a rage. And he was in a rage because his student was preoccupied with Buddhism. You can know all the kings of England and all the fights historical, from Marathon to Waterloo and Waterloo. You can know all the patriarchs one after the other. You can know all the koans, dum 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 dum. Stop. Zen is trying to stop the mind, to keep you attentive so that something else can get in. Something can be given to you. When you just move in the Zendo, this is just one practice, it's not for everybody. Move, and you just do that, hold it. Thinking about nothing else, just being that vibration in the body, that rise and fall of your body as you breathe. Mu will appear. Mu will appear. It's another way of saying you will see your own nature, which is the point of Zen, which transcends Buddhism. It's not limited to Buddhists. Zen rejects no one, as the master of Hakuin's temple once said. We reject no one except someone who trivializes the whole practice. We will accept anyone, no matter what class of society he or she comes from, as long as they come and give themselves completely to Zazen. So, the study of Buddhism can be a big distraction. Very interesting. But you can get that in any college, Buddhism 101. Any comments on this? It's really a conversation. Yes?
Yeah, I always, I always get amazed by seeing the things that Michelangelo did, which was based on action, using his hands. His phrase was, I'm still learning, not thinking, but creating action. Whether that's Zen.
Not yet. It's still pious talk. It's good pious talk. Uplifting, morally helpful. Won't do it. Stop it. It's not move, it should be the equivalent. It's just your breath, it should be the breath that does not let in thinking. That is part of the real ignorance in Zen, filling your head with good things, interesting things, but the block the development of seeing your own nature, which they would say is the great tragedy of life. Maybe not. People live very good lives without it. And sometimes then people who everybody says is enlightened can be pretty unhappy. There are no guarantees. But there should be no doubt about Zazen. It's not clearing the mind. Who told you you had a mind? Who told you can clear it or you should clear it? That's just moral, uplifting advice. Is this really helpful? No thought, no doubt. There's the story of one woman. I never heard it. I read this in the Denko Roku, and I never heard anyone even mention it. There was someone in the town who was pretending that they were a Zen teacher and drawing students. One woman finally went to him, and further, who are you? And he said, don't play with this. Don't play with this. People have given their lives for this. So I think that's good advice. Don't play with Zen. Just waste time, waste a lot of time in your lives. If Zen is not for you, find something that is. Find something that works. Life is too short. Don't play with this. Anything else?
We need to get out of here soon.
We're done?
Yeah.
We're done. I was waiting for you to say that. This is a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Dogen called people who sit noble practitioners. I love that. You are noble practitioners. To attempt this and to do it, to see it through, is great nobility. And I want to thank Michael too. I'm very happy. I have a number of Zen teachers. Some wonderful people have come to me. London to Mexico City. Someone I taught is teaching Zen. And everyone that I made a teacher is teaching Zen. And I think that's really wonderful. I've known Michael for a long time. I met him in 1969 when he was a young student at Fordham.
You're dating us.
He was the brightest student in the class, of course. And he went on to great things. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Should we do the vows? That's already the vow. So I want to thank Roshi for being with us today, and I'm glad you could all come out. Some regulars, but also some new people here for the first time, Art and Mark. So I hope you don't just come when the big shots are here. You come just to sit anytime, all the time, to practice just being and being present and being weak and being open and being. So that's, as we've just heard. So I hope that's what we'll do. So if we could rise.